Finding a penny on the ground seems to mean that you have luck on your side. So why are some people wanting to get rid of it? I'll have the answer to that question coming up. Hello, I'm Bobby Lee, and this is a Money Crashers crash course with reasons why we should or shouldn't keep the penny around. The penny is small in size, but not in prominence. In fact, you may have one in your pocket right now. Some consider it dead weight. Others view it as a valuable piece of currency. But fact is that for every person who wants to get rid of the penny, there are many more who want to keep it. A lobbying group supporting the penny says their poll shows two-thirds of Americans want to keep the penny around. On the other side, President Obama and a nonpartisan organization called Citizens to Retire the U.S. Penny say the 1 cent piece is obsolete and a sign of government waste. Let's go into detail on each group's arguments. People who argue to retire the penny say, 1. They're useless. When the baby boomers were young, a penny still had some value. Today, there's literally nothing you can buy with a single penny, and you can't do much else with it either. Vending machines don't accept them, and neither do most parking meters. Even automatic toll booths won't take them, except in Illinois. And if a single penny is useless, a whole bunch of pennies isn't much better. If you tried paying for something in a store with a fistful of pennies, you can expect dirty looks from both the clerk and other customers. That is, if the store just doesn't flat out refuse to take them. Pennies are so hard to spend that many people don't even bother. They just store them all in jars or even throw them away. Now, there are precedents for getting rid of coins that are too small to use. Back in 1857, the U.S. Mint stopped producing half-penny coins, which would have had a purchasing power of 14 cents in 2015 dollars. Second, they waste time. As useless as pennies are, most of us can't avoid them. Often, when we pay with cash at a store, the total amount doesn't end in a multiple of 5 cents. So to pay the exact amount, we have to either hand over some pennies or receive some change. This not only weighs down our pockets, it also holds up the line while we mess around counting out coins. One study showed that handling pennies adds an average of 2 seconds to each cash transaction. Multiply that by the average number of transactions American consumers make each year, and it comes to 48 million hours wasted counting pennies annually. To save time at the register, some businesses have experimented with rounding all transactions to the nearest nickel. The New Jersey Star-Ledger reports that several Chipotle restaurants tried this in 2012, but customers who had extra cents added to their bills complained. Rather than drop the practice completely, however, the stores simply decided to round all bills down to the nearest 5 cents, since losing a cent or two on most transactions was cheaper than paying out clerks to count the pennies. Third, they're bad for the environment. Despite what the old song says, pennies don't really come from heaven. They come from mines in the earth, zinc mines mostly, because pennies are more than 97% zinc. As the U.S. Mint explains, the copper surface of a penny only accounts for 2.5% of its metal content. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, zinc ores contain only 3 to 11% metallic zinc. Along with the zinc, the ores usually contain other metals, including toxic metals like cadmium and lead. In addition, zinc itself, though necessary in small amounts, is harmful in high doses to both humans and animals. All these toxic metals contaminate water, soil, and plants surrounding the mine. Producing pennies also uses a great deal of energy. It takes energy to extract the zinc from the ore, to roll it out and stamp it into coins, and to transport the coins to banks. Fourth, they cost the government money. Anti-penny advocates are fond of pointing out that pennies now cost more to produce than they're actually worth. It now costs about 1.7 cents to make 1 cent. That means whenever the mint produces a penny and sends it out to a bank, it actually loses money on the deal. The Mint has researched the possibility of making pennies from cheaper materials, but have found that there's no way to bring the cost of producing them below their face value. Of course, we must keep in mind that the high cost of making a penny isn't necessarily bad because coins are reusable. In theory, a single penny could be used for hundreds, thousands, or even millions of transactions before it dropped out of circulation. However, this only works if coins actually circulate, and pennies, as noted previously, often don't. As a result, the Mint just has to keep making more pennies at a loss. In 2014, the Mint shipped out more pennies than nickels, quarters, and dimes put together, over 7.9 billion coins. That adds up to a loss of over $55 million for that year alone. One problem with this argument, according to penny proponents, is that if there were no more pennies, the mint would have to produce more nickels. Nickels also cost more to make than their face value, about 8.1 cents apiece. So the mint loses even more money on each nickel it produces than it does on each penny. Many anti-penny activists think that the ideal solution to this problem is to eliminate the nickel as well, making the dime the smallest coin in circulation. Dimes only cost 3.9 cents to make, so the mint could produce more of those without losing money. And of course, there's the convenience argument of rounding to the nearest tenth cent for easier math. Proponents of the penny say that keeping the penny, one, keeps prices low. Penny supporters point out that if pennies are eliminated, all cash transactions will have to be rounded to the nearest nickel, leading to a rounding tax. Consumers using credit wouldn't be affected by this since their transactions could still be counted out to the cent. However, a study shows that low-income Americans would be hit especially hard because they are more likely than other consumers to pay for their purchases with cash. The pro-penny group backs up his claim by pointing to a 1990 study that showed that rounding cash sales up or down to the nearest nickel would cost consumers more than $600,000 a year and would trigger an increase in the Consumer Price Index. The CPI is tied to government payments like Social Security. But a newer 2007 study contradicts these findings. It concluded that once taxes and fees were factored in, consumers would actually come out slightly ahead on average with prices rounded off to the nearest nickel. The study also notes that even if prices did increase, the difference would be so tiny that it couldn't possibly affect the CPI, and thus it would not trigger widespread inflation. Another piece of evidence comes from Canada, which stopped minting its penny in 2013. Prices there are now rounded up or down to the nearest 5 cents for cash transactions, while payments made with credit, debit, or old-fashioned checks are still settled down to the cent. Since the changeover, the inflation rate in Canada has remained well below its historical average of 3.2%. In Canada, eliminating the penny has not led to widespread increases in prices. Second, charities rely on them. Pro-penny groups argue that even if pennies seem worthless, they actually add up to hundreds of millions of dollars in charitable donations each year. Charities such as the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, the Salvation Army, and the Ronald McDonald House raise funds through penny drives, encouraging people to donate their unwanted pennies for important causes. The very fact that pennies have so little value makes them useful to charities because people are happy to give them away. Penny opponents point out several problems with this argument. First of all, if the US Mint stops producing pennies, they won't simply lose their value overnight. Instead, the coins will be gradually pulled out of circulation. However, stores will no longer be required to accept pennies, so consumers will have even more incentive to donate the coins to charity, since they won't be able to use them anywhere else. Second, once pennies drop out of circulation, the nickel will become the lowest value coin cluttering up people's pockets. So instead of penny drives, charities could start holding nickel drives, putting out bottles and wishing fountains to collect the new useless coins. And since each nickel is worth about 5 times as much as a penny, charities would gather 5 times as much money with each spare coin tossed into the jar. Citizens to Retire the U.S. Penny points out that in countries that have retired the 1 cent coin, charities have not reported a significant drop in donations, though the group doesn't provide any sources to back up this claim. Finally, small change drives aren't a very cost-effective way for charities to raise funds. It takes a lot of time for volunteers to pick up, clean, sort, and count all those coins, and the more pennies there are in the mix, the less value the charity gets for each coin it handles. And as it grows even easier for charities to accept donations electronically, coin drives are likely to play a diminishing role in fundraising. Third, they honor Lincoln. Some supporters of the penny point out that it's the only coin bearing the image of Abraham Lincoln. Eliminating the penny, they argue, would be disrespectful to his memory. Anti-penny activists scoff at this argument, pointing out that Lincoln would still remain on the $5 bill, which is actually useful to consumers. The bills, according to the Federal Reserve, cost only 11 cents to print, far less than their $5 face value, making them a much more cost-effective way to honor Lincoln than a penny that cost 1.7 cents to mint. Fourth, Americans like them. Despite all the arguments for retiring the penny, as of 2014, the majority of Americans are in favor of keeping it. A YouGov poll from January 2014 shows that 51% of Americans favor keeping the penny, while just 34% think that we should eliminate it. A 2014 poll by Americans for Common Sense found an even stronger number in favor of pennies, saying 68% of adults want the penny to stay in circulation, although the fact that the poll was conducted by a pro-penny group suggests that questions may have been somewhat biased. What's less clear is why Americans are so committed to a coin with so little monetary value. Americans for Common Sense claims that support for the penny jumps when people are, quote, educated about the issues around the penny, such as rounding at the cash register. However, given the previously mentioned study that shows price rounding is not a problem, it's hard to see why knowing more about this issue would make people more strongly pro-penny. President Obama, in his 2014 YouTube chat, suggested that Americans are attached emotionally to the penny because it brings back happy childhood memories of saving pennies in piggy banks and seeing them eventually turn into dollars. Bottom line, it's possible that what happens to the penny could end up depending not only on the law, but on decisions made by businesses. If more businesses follow Chipotle's example and start rounding down their bills, their customers will find themselves with fewer pennies in their pockets. As both stores and individuals stop keeping pennies on hand, banks won't need to supply as many. Eventually, this reduces demand and will result in fewer pennies being minted each year. And so long as most Americans remain attached to the penny, whether their reasons are logical or not, it's unlikely that a bill to eliminate it will ever make it through Congress. Let's review what we learned today. First, we talked about the controversies surrounding the penny. Then we talked about 4 reasons why we should keep the penny. And then we ended with 4 reasons why we should get rid of the penny. For more information about the future of the penny, visit our website at moneycrashers.com. I'm Bobby Lee with Money Crashers, and this has been a crash course on why we should or shouldn't keep the penny around.